When my dad married Karen, I didn't think much of the whole blended family thing. I was 19, just out of my awkward high school years, and too busy adjusting to college to care much about anything else. Her son, Julian, was 2 years older than me, already working and living at home part-time, which meant we didn't cross paths often. We were never close. Polite, civil, but distant. He was the kind of guy who always had girls texting him, spent weekends at the gym, and kept protein bars in every room like they were part of the furniture. I, on the other hand, was more into books, art, and working shifts at a local coffee shop between classes. He once called me quiet, which I knew was code for weird, and I'd called him a walking fitness commercial when he wasn't around. So yeah, not much bonding. Still, the weirdness was manageable. Until the weekend, everything changed. Dad and Karen had gone out of town for some wine tasting thing they did every November. They asked Julian to keep an eye on me, just in case, even though I was 20 now and perfectly capable of not burning the house down. Julian acted like it was a huge inconvenience, but stayed anyway, mostly because our fridge was full and his apartment's wasn't. That Saturday, he had plans all day. Some fitness expo or something. I figured I'd have the house to myself, so I made the most of it. Lazy morning, cereal for lunch, gaming in sweats. And somewhere between hour 3 and hour 4 of being horizontal on the couch, I got distracted. It had been a while. I wasn't seeing anyone, and, well, privacy, boredom, and a half-finished fantasy from the night before created a dangerous combo. So I let myself sink into it, right there in my room, door closed, headphones in, just trying to shake off the tension. Nothing dramatic, just me and some harmless solo time. And then the door opened. I didn't even hear it. My headphones were on, my eyes were closed, and by the time I realized someone was in the room, it was too late. Julian? "Whoa," he said, followed by a sharp laugh that made my entire body seize up. I grabbed the blanket from beside me, fumbling to cover myself, heart racing in that sheer horror panic way that only comes from being absolutely caught. "Jesus, knock, would you?" He didn't leave. That was the worst part. He just stood there, in the doorway, eyebrows raised, one hand still on the handle, the other holding a bag of chips. "Dude," I snapped, flushing so hard I felt dizzy. "Close the damn door." "Relax," he said, stepping inside like this was just another casual conversation. "Didn't realize you'd be doing all that in the middle of the afternoon. You didn't knock. You didn't lock." He shrugged and sat on the edge of my bed, totally unbothered, the chips crinkling in his hand. "Honestly, kinda surprised. You don't seem like the type." "What type?" I asked, still clutching the blanket like it was the only thing keeping me from spontaneously combusting. "The type to go to town on himself with the door unlocked and the sound cranked up." He chuckled, tossing a chip into his mouth. "What were you watching anyway?" "Julian, seriously, get out." I tried to sound angry, but I came out mortified. He didn't budge. Instead, he tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. "You into guys?" I blinked. My mouth opened, but no words came out. He smirked. "Relax. I'm not judging. I mean..." He gestured toward the screen of my laptop, which I had slammed shut in a panic. "Kinda obvious now." "I didn't know you'd be back this early." "You didn't answer the question," he said, like we were talking about movie preferences. I let out a breath, tense and shaky. "Yeah, I am." Julian nodded, like that confirmed some theory he'd had. "Huh. What's that supposed to mean?" He stood up, setting the chip bag on my desk, and walked over to the door. But he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the frame and looked at me for a long second, expression unreadable. "Next time," he said, his voice lower, quieter, "maybe let me know ahead of time, so I can get a turn." My heart stopped. "What?" But he was already grinning, shaking his head like he'd just dropped the punchline to a joke and didn't care if I laughed or not. "Just saying," he said, eyes flicking down and back up. "You looked kinda good like that." And then he left. Door closed behind him. No further explanation. I sat there, stunned. blanket still clutched to my chest, pulse in my ears like a drum, and I had no idea what the hell just happened. But I knew one thing for sure. That wasn't a joke, not the way he said it, and it sure as hell wasn't the last time he'd bring it up. The next morning was one of those painfully slow starts. The kind where every sound felt sharper, the light was too bright, and my brain refused to move past what had happened the night before. I stayed in my room longer than usual, pretending to scroll through my phone, half expecting Julian to knock on my door and laugh it off, say it was a joke, a dare, anything. But he didn't. The silence stretched. Eventually, hunger overruled my nerves. I threw on a hoodie, ran a hand through my hair, and headed downstairs, hoping maybe he'd gone out again. No such luck. He was in the kitchen, standing barefoot at the stove in just mesh shorts, cooking scrambled eggs like we didn't have a massive unspoken thing hanging between us. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Want some?" he asked casually, as if I hadn't been mid-stroke when he walked in yesterday and said he wanted a turn. "I'm good," I mumbled, grabbing a glass from the cabinet, trying not to stare at the way his back flexed as he stirred. He glanced over his shoulder. "Suit yourself." I busied myself with water, not trusting my voice. He plated the eggs, sat at the island, and started eating like it was any other Sunday. "You sleep okay?" he asked through a mouthful of food. "Fine." He nodded. "Cool." We ate in silence for a minute. Then he leaned back in his chair and stretched, arms behind his head, and looked at me in that way people do when they already know something but want you to say it anyway. "So, about yesterday," I tensed. "What about it?" "You don't have to be weird about it." I raised an eyebrow. "I don't have to be weird? You walked in on me and said something pretty messed up, by the way, and now I'm just supposed to, what, pretend it didn't happen?" He smirked. "I didn't say it was messed up. You did." "Julian," he shrugged, standing to rinse his plate. "Look, I'm not trying to freak you out. I just thought maybe it'd help if we were honest with each other." I stared at him, trying to figure out what game he was playing. Honest about what? He looked at me. Really looked this time, and the playfulness dropped just enough for something else to surface. "I'm seeing the way you look at me," he said, voice steady, not cruel. "You think I haven't noticed? Ever since our parents got married, you were curious." I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't. Because he wasn't wrong. He set the plate on the drying rack and turned to face me, hands braced on the edge of the sink. I didn't say anything before because I didn't know what to do with it. But then yesterday, you looked good. I'm not going to lie. That last part hit like a slap and a kiss all at once. I stared at him, every muscle in my body tight. "You're serious?" "Yeah," he said simply. "I mean, I didn't plan on saying it, but it's out now." "And what? You just, what? Want to mess with me?" He shook his head, slowly walking around the island until he was standing in front of me. "No," he said. "I want to know if you want to turn." My mouth went dry. "You're not gay." "No," he said with a half smile. "But I'm not exactly straight either." The room felt smaller, hotter. I backed up a step, unsure if I was panicking or excited or both. "Julian, we're stepbrothers." And that's what? Not allowed? Newsflash, it's not illegal. We didn't grow up together. We're not blood. We're just two guys under one roof who have been avoiding something for too long. I swallowed, heart pounding in my chest like a siren. "You really think this is a good idea?" "No," he said honestly, "but I think we both want it." He stepped closer. His hand brushed mine, not grabbing, just there. Warm, heavy. My fingers twitched, but I didn't move away. Then he leaned in slightly, his voice low. "If I'm wrong, tell me, and I'll never bring it up again." Silence. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Because I didn't want him to stop. And he could see that all over my face. He gave me one more second, then pulled back and said quietly, "That's what I thought." And just like that, he walked out of the kitchen. This time, he didn't have to say it. He was giving me the choice. But it was pretty damn clear the next time, if there was a next time, it'd be because I asked him for a turn. I tried to get through the rest of that day like it was normal. Spoiler, it wasn't. Everything felt off. The way the air hung in the house. How quiet it got every time we passed each other in the hallway. Even the creak of the floorboards under my feet felt louder than usual. My brain wouldn't stop replaying what Julian said in the kitchen. "I want to know if you want to turn." That sentence had dug into my skull like a splinter. And the worst part? I didn't even know what I wanted. I mean, I knew. I'd always known, deep down, that I found him attractive. That wasn't new. But this? Him openly admitting he wasn't straight, that he'd been paying attention? That was a whole different game. By the time night fell, I'd worked myself into a full mental pretzel. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to not see him either. So I did what any confused guy would do. I holed up in my room, threw on some mindless YouTube videos, and pretended to care about someone's ranking of all-time greatest video game villains. Around 11, I heard a soft knock on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, just a quiet tap-tap, like he was giving me an out. I hesitated, stomach turning. Then I called out, "Yeah?" The door opened, just a crack, and Julian peeked in. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied. He stepped inside, leaving the door open behind him. He was wearing sweats and a fitted t-shirt that did zero favors for my self-control. His hair was damp. He must have just showered. "I was going to watch a movie," he said. "If you're not busy," I blinked. "Now?" He shrugged. "Can't sleep." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, okay." We ended up on the couch in the den. The room was dark, lit only by the TV. He let me pick the movie. I chose something dumb and safe, a sci-fi action thing that neither of us would care about. Julian sat on one end of the couch, and I sat on the other. For the first half hour, we didn't talk, just popcorn between us, the occasional comment about how bad the acting was. It felt almost normal. Almost. But I could feel the tension, the kind you don't have to name, the kind that vibrates under your skin. Halfway through the movie, I shifted and stretched my legs out. My foot lightly brushed his thigh, totally by accident, but I didn't move it right away. Neither did he. He looked over at me, not with a smirk, not like he was messing around this time, just watching. My chest tightened. "Julian," I said, voice quieter than I meant. He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah?" I swallowed. "About what you said earlier." He waited. I looked down at my hands. "I don't know what I'm doing." "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to be honest." Silence. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the TV. I met his eyes. "I haven't done anything like that. Not with a guy." He nodded slowly. "That's fine." I forced out a shaky laugh. "You're really calm about all this." "Because I don't want to freak you out," he said, his voice low, steady. "And because I know if I push, it'll be over before it starts." Something about the way he said that made my throat tighten. "Do you want this?" he asked. I hesitated. Then I nodded. His expression didn't change. He didn't smirk, didn't joke. He just scooted closer, slow and careful, until his leg brushed mine. "Okay," he said. Then he reached up, tucked a hand behind my neck and leaned in. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy or unsure. He kissed me. Soft, slow, deliberate. And the second his lips touched mine, everything else, every worry, every question, fell away like dead weight. I kissed him back. It was awkward, sure. I didn't know where to put my hands. I could barely breathe. But it was real. And when he pulled back just an inch, his eyes searched mine like he was making sure I was still okay. I nodded, and he kissed me again, this time longer. By the time we pulled apart, we were both breathing a little heavier, the movie long forgotten. He rested his forehead against mine. "Still nervous? Still a little terrified," I admitted. He grinned. "Good. Means you're not completely numb," I snorted. "You're ridiculous." "Yeah," he said, brushing a thumb against my cheek. "But you're into it." And yeah, maybe I was. The next few minutes were a blur, not because they were fast, but because I couldn't wrap my head around how surreal it all felt. Sitting there in our parents' house, on the same couch we used to ignore each other on, now kissing like it was the most natural thing in the world. It didn't compute. But I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. Julian had this way of being calm, steady, like nothing ever rattled him. And I think that's why I let him lean back into me, hands on my waist. Now, like we'd done this before. Like we weren't stepbrothers. Like we weren't tiptoeing around a line that probably didn't even exist anymore. When our lips parted again, we stayed close, breathing the same air. My hand was resting on his chest now, warm, solid, heartbeat steady beneath my palm. I could barely believe any of this was real. "You okay?" he asked again, quieter this time. I nodded. "Yeah, just trying to figure out if I'm dreaming," he smirked. "You dream about me often?" I groaned and leaned my head into his shoulder. "Don't ruin it," Julian chuckled, the sound vibrating through me. Okay, no more jokes unless you want them." "I don't even know what I want." "You'll figure it out," he said, "and I'll stop if you ever want me to." That part hit me harder than I expected. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't trying to get something out of me. He was just there, present. And I hadn't realized how much I needed that. We didn't go any further that night. There was no rush. He didn't even try to make it physical, which was kind of the opposite of how all my first-time fantasies had gone in my head. Instead, we ended up lying side by side on the couch, his arm under my head, watching the end of the movie like it meant something. And when the credits rolled, and I turned to him, half asleep, he kissed the side of my head and said, "Come sleep in my room if you want. Just sleep." And I went. Not because I was trying to be bold or brave, but because that was the safest I had felt in a long time. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds outside the window and Julian's steady breathing next to me. We were facing opposite directions, his back to me, but his hand was loosely resting against my arm, like he didn't realize he'd done it in his sleep. For a second, I just watched him. The way the morning light hit his skin, the way his shoulders rose and fell. It felt easy, which was probably what made the moment after so jarring. Because just as I was thinking I could get used to this, I heard the front door slam. Then footsteps. "Julian?" My heart dropped. It was Karen. She wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday night. I scrambled out of bed in full panic, nearly tripping over myself as I grabbed my hoodie off the floor. Julian stirred, groggy. "What's going on?" "Your mom's home," I hissed. He blinked, looked at the clock, then sat up fast. "Shit." I bolted out the room, barely managing to make it down the hall and into my own bedroom before I heard her voice again, this time closer. "You guys up?" she called out. I shut the door, heart pounding, and leaned against it like I could physically hold back the embarrassment about to flood me. A second later, I heard Julian's door open. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice way too casual. "Didn't know you were getting back early." "Yeah, we made good time. Your dad's grabbing the bags." There was a pause. "Smells like you guys had popcorn last night," she added, lighter now. "Did you two actually hang out?" "Yeah," Julian said. "Watched a movie." "You and Liam? Wow. That's a miracle." I could practically hear him smirking. "Yeah, well, times change." I stayed hidden in my room until she went back downstairs, trying to calm down. But even with the nerves, the part one couldn't stop thinking about was what Julian said. Times change. Yeah, they really, really do. After Karen's unexpected return, everything got a little weird again, but not in the way I expected. I thought there'd be tension, awkwardness, that Julian would pull away and pretend like none of it ever happened. Instead, he was cool. Too cool, even. Like he wasn't worried at all. That afternoon, we ended up in the backyard, half helping with groceries, half pretending like nothing had changed. Karen was in full mom mode, talking about wine samples and asking Julian to carry in the heavier stuff. I hovered awkwardly nearby, waiting for the moment he'd drop some sarcastic remark or sneak in a glance. But he didn't. He was casual, relaxed. Like kissing your stepbrother on the mouth one night and sleeping in the same bed wasn't a big deal. Later that evening, when we finally had a moment alone, passing in the hallway, empty-handed after helping unload the car, I stopped him. "You're acting like nothing happened." Julian looked at me, calm as ever. "You want me to act like it did? In front of my mom?" "No, but I don't know. You're just so chill." He leaned in slightly, smirking. "I told you, I'm not here to freak you out." "Too late." He chuckled, then brushed his fingers along my hand as we passed each other. Tonight, he whispered, so low I barely heard it. My room. Then he disappeared into the kitchen like he hadn't just short-circuited my brain. That night took forever to arrive. Karen went to bed early, tired from the drive, and I waited like a kid sneaking out past curfew. I brushed my teeth, turned off my lights, and lay in bed with my heart thumping until I heard his door creak open down the hall. I didn't even think. I just got up, quiet as possible, and padded barefoot to his room. He was sitting on the bed, scrolling through his phone, already shirtless. "Thought you changed your mind," he said. I almost did. He looked up, studying me for a beat, then patted the space next to him. "Come here." I hesitated for maybe half a second before I sat beside him. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight, and I could feel the warmth of his skin just inches from mine. My whole body was buzzing. "You don't have to do anything," he said, voice steady. "Just stay." I looked at him. "What if I want to?" He paused. That finally wiped the smirk off his face. Then, slowly, he leaned in again. This kiss was different. Still gentle, but deeper this time. Less like testing the water, more like stepping in. His hand found the side of my neck, fingers curling just slightly, and I felt my whole chest clench up with nerves and adrenaline and want. We kissed like we meant it. Like we both needed it. Like this thing we'd been pretending didn't exist was finally too big to ignore. Somewhere in that blur, I ended up straddling his lap, my arms wrapped around his shoulders. His hands roamed my sides, never rushing, just exploring, learning. We didn't take it all the way. Neither of us was in a hurry, and honestly, I was glad for that. The heat was there, undeniable, but so was the care. After, we lay back on his bed, side by side again, and I rested my head on his shoulder. He whispered, "You're really not what I expected when our parents got married." "Yeah?" I said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. A scrawny little nerd who'd stay out of my way." "I am a scrawny little nerd." He grinned. "Not anymore. And definitely not the stay out of my way part." I laughed softly. "I guess we're really doing this, huh?" Julian reached over and took my hand under the blanket. "Only if you want to." I looked at him, all of him, and realized that, yeah, I really did. The next morning, I expected the awkwardness to come crashing back in like a hangover. Heavy, embarrassing, impossible to ignore. But it didn't. Instead, I woke up to Julian still asleep beside me, one arm slung lazily across my waist like it belonged there. His breathing was deep and even, the kind of sleep that meant he wasn't faking it. I watched his chest rise and fall for a moment, amazed by how normal it felt. Eventually, I slid out of bed, quietly pulling the blanket back over him, and tiptoed back to my room. I didn't want Karen walking in on me this time. I made coffee, kept the TV low, tried not to look too obviously flustered. Julian came down later, hair a mess, t-shirt clinging to his chest, eyes still heavy with sleep. He grabbed a mug and sat across from me like nothing was different. But then he did something small, barely noticeable to anyone else. He reached out under the table and tapped his foot against mine. I looked up. He just smirked into his coffee like it wasn't a big deal. And somehow, it wasn't. That whole week shifted. We didn't talk about what we were. There were no deep emotional conversations or labels. We weren't boyfriends. Hell, we were barely even brothers. But something had changed, and it hovered in the air between us everywhere we went. At night, we snuck into each other's rooms, whispered under the covers, kissed like we were daring the walls to hear us. Nothing graphic, not yet, but enough to make me crave more. During the day, it was all glances and subtle touches, a shoulder brush in the hallway, a hand on my lower back when no one was looking. Sometimes it was all I could do not to react, especially when Karen was right there asking if we wanted seconds of pasta. The tension built like a storm on the horizon. Not bad tension, good, charged, like something was coming, and neither of us knew exactly when or how. And then it finally broke. It was a Thursday night. 2 days before Karen and my dad were heading out again for a family thing Julian and I both managed to duck out of. We were alone, playing some stupid racing game in the den, our legs stretched out, our arms casually brushing each time one of us leaned too far. I lost. Again. Rematch, I muttered, dropping the controller on the couch. Julian stretched. You sure? Your pride's already taken a beating. Screw you, I said, playfully kicking his leg. He caught my foot before it landed again, holding it between both of his hands. His fingers dug in slightly, firm but slow, and I froze. Ticklish? He asked, eyes gleaming. Don't you dare. He did. For like 3 seconds. Then stopped, still holding my ankle in his lap, still staring at me. You ever think about it? He asked softly. I blinked. About what? He didn't answer right away. Us. If we weren't, stepbrothers. I swallowed. I think about it even with that. He nodded, his thumb brushing along my ankle bone. I want to do more, he said, but I need to know you're okay with it. I couldn't speak for a second. My mouth was dry, my heart racing. I am, I said. Julian leaned forward, slowly, hands still wrapped around my ankle. His other hand rested against my thigh, his touch warm through my sweatpants. You can tell me if it's too much. I nodded. Then he kissed me again. But this time, it wasn't soft. It was need. It was want. And I knew, right then, that whatever this was between us, it was real. And it was about to go somewhere neither of us had ever dared go before. We didn't talk much that night, not because there wasn't anything to say, but because saying anything might have broken the moment. Julian kissed me like he'd been waiting weeks, maybe months, for it. And I kissed him back like I finally believed this was really happening. There was heat, sure, but what stayed with me later was the way he slowed down. The way his forehead touched mine after, like he needed to stay connected even after everything got quiet. At some point, we ended up lying tangled together on the couch, the glow of the paused TV screen lighting our faces. His fingers traced lazy circles against my arm while I tried to breathe like my chest wasn't full of 1,000 feelings at once. You're really different than I thought, he said after a while. Yeah? I asked, smiling into the crook of his neck. How'd you think I'd be? I don't know. I thought you'd panic. Or bolt. Or, make some big speech about boundaries and family. I mean, I could still do that if you really want. He laughed softly. Nah. I like this version better. A beat passed. Then, quieter. I don't want to stop. Then don't. It's not just something casual for you, is it? I shook my head. Not even close. He nodded, like he already knew. But I think he needed to hear it. The next day brought something new. Guilt. Not the kind that comes from doing something wrong, exactly, but the kind that seeps in when you start wondering how long you can keep something this big a secret. Karen and my dad were prepping for their weekend trip, running around the house, doing their usual half-packed last-minute scramble. Meanwhile, Julian and I exchanged glances in the hallway like two kids hiding a stolen cigarette. He brushed my hand in passing once when no one was looking. And later, when I came into the kitchen, he handed me my coffee before I asked for it. Little things, but every one of them made my chest squeeze tighter. The thing is, no one would ever guess. There wasn't anything inherently suspicious about two stepbrothers being in the same house while their parents were out. On paper, we were just housemates. But we weren't, and that difference, unspoken, hidden, was starting to feel like a weight. That night, after the house emptied out and we were finally alone again, I sat on the edge of Julian's bed, staring at the floor. He came in with 2 bottles of beer, tossed one to me, and plopped down beside me. You've been quiet, he said, just thinking. Regretting it? I looked up. No, never. He nodded. Me either. I hesitated. But what are we going to do? About what? This. Us. You really think no one's going to notice? Julian leaned back on his elbows. Eventually? Probably. But that's not tonight's problem. I'm serious. I know, he said, softer now, and I don't have a perfect answer. But I do know this. Whatever happens, I'm not letting you carry it alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat. And if they find out, he took a breath, then we deal with it. I looked over at him, at his steady eyes, the set of his jaw, the way he looked sure, even when I wasn't, and I believed him. Whatever this was, wherever it was going, we were in it together. Julian wasn't wrong. People did start to notice. Not all at once. Not dramatically, but little things. Subtle shifts. The kind that only people who really know you pick up on. Karen asked once why we were getting along so well lately. You two used to barely talk, she said, half joking as she stirred pasta. Now it's like you're best friends. Julian didn't even blink. Guess we finally figured each other out. That made her smile. Took you long enough. My dad mentioned it too, one night while we were washing dishes. I'm glad you and Julian have found your rhythm, he said. It means a lot to Karen. To me, too. I just nodded, keeping my eyes on the soap suds, if only they knew. We kept it quiet. Careful. Late nights, hushed tones, kisses stolen in rooms with locked doors. And as much as I hated lying, there was something electric about it. Like we were living in a pocket of time that belonged only to us. But we couldn't stay hidden forever. It finally came to a head one weekend in December. We were all sitting around the living room, me, Julian, Karen, and my dad, watching some dumb holiday baking show. Julian and I were on opposite ends of the couch, careful not to sit too close, but every now and then, our eyes would meet. Just for a second. That's when Karen asked it. So she said, offhand, like she was commenting on the weather, "Is there something going on between you two?" The room froze. I felt my stomach drop. My dad paused the TV. Julian looked over at her. "What do you mean?" Karen raised an eyebrow. "I'm not blind. You've been acting different, both of you." My throat went dry. I could feel the heat creeping up my neck. "I mean, I'm not accusing you of anything," she added quickly. "It's just, you're close. Closer than most stepbrothers I know." Julian looked at me. Just a glance. A tiny, split second. "Are you okay with this kind of look?" I didn't move. Didn't speak. Then he turned back to her. "We are close," he said. "And yeah, there's something going on." Karen blinked. "What kind of something?" "The kind you probably already guessed." My dad exhaled. Karen just stared for a moment, then looked at me. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice softer now. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, my dad stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, wow, all right." Karen sat back, clearly trying to process. "I don't know what to say," Julian nodded. "You don't have to say anything tonight." And to their credit, they didn't. That night was quiet. No yelling, no drama. Just two parents trying to wrap their heads around something they never saw coming. The next morning, Karen pulled me aside while Julian was out front shoveling snow. "I just want you to be safe," she said, "and happy. If this is real for you, then I'll figure out how to be okay with it." I didn't expect that, but I was grateful. She squeezed my hand. "It's not what I imagined for either of you, but maybe that's not a bad thing." Months passed. We didn't tell the world. We didn't post couple photos or go to dinner holding hands, but we stopped hiding in our own house. We started living, really living, in whatever this was. Julian still teased me about being the little brother. I still called him a gym rat and rolled my eyes at his TikToks. But every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me across a room like he still couldn't believe this was real. And yeah, neither could I, because the truth is, when he walked in on me that night, I thought everything would crash and burn. But instead, he looked at me and wanted a turn. And in the end, I'm glad I gave him one.